Today we're going to make detailed connectors for the 3D Terraino system. They're like the simple connectors, but they have a piece on the outside for decoration. In this case, I made sort of wooden columns. And if you have looked at the simple connectors video, you're already halfway there to making detail connectors, because all the detail connectors are based on the cross connector from the previous video. So let's get started. So we're going to start out by making one more template. We're going to make the 1 1/8 by 2 inch template, which is just going to be made out of foam with the paper still on it. We're going to use these two pieces, the 1 inch by 2 inch and the 1 1/8 inch by 2 inch templates, to make the facades for all of these connectors. Now the cool thing is with these connectors, they're all built off of the cross connector in the previous video. If you need to learn how to make those, look at the previous video, GameGearMaster number 5, simple connectors. Here what we're doing is we're making a connector spacer that we're going to use to make it really easy to mass produce these connectors and make sure they're all the right size and the right widths. There's 2 layers of masking tape on here to thicken it up, and this spacer also has paper still on the foam. And we're going to cut off the excess masking tape. Now here you're looking at a T-connector, and what we use that connector spacer for is pretty cool. Basically, we're going to use it to cut that pillar where that facade piece, that exterior facade piece, is going to be on. So you can see that spacer fits in there perfectly because, well, we used that spacer to cut that piece out. So here we're starting with our cross connector from the previous video, GameGearMaster number 5. And what we're going to do to make our T-connector is we're going to trim down one of those pillars using our spacer, just like this. So we hold it in place, and with our mechanical pencil, we're going to mark the part that we're going to take off, and then just cut it with our utility knife and make sure that utility blade is perpendicular to the surface. And we're going to cut out our 1 1/8 by 2 inch facade piece using our new template. And this facade piece has no paper on either side, it's just foam. So now we have the 2 pieces for our connector, and we're going to use our grid square to set the depth of the facade piece and the cross connector inside, just like this. Kind of like we did for the walls. So the cross connector is in the grooves and the facade is on top of the grid squares. We're going to put a thin layer of hot glue on there. Don't put it all the way down to the bottom because there's no facade there to have the glue to stick to anyway. And eyeball it to make sure that facade is centered onto the cross connector, and just hold it for a few seconds and it'll be done. Okay, so now we're going to make the straight connector, which is very similar to that T connector, except we're just going to cut off and trim 2 of the pillars on our cross connector, the 2 opposite each other. And we're going to add 2 1 1/8 inch by 2 inch facade pieces. So here I'm doing the one side of the connector, and now we're going to do the opposite end of that same cross piece in the cross connector. Mark that off and trim those pieces off. So that's the one side, and then we're going to do the other side, opposite it. So you can see now we have 2 narrow pillars opposite each other, and I've already in this case cut the 1 1/8 by 2 inch pieces of foam for the outside facade. And we're going to use the grid square again to set the depth of the cross connector interior piece and the facade pieces on the outside. This should look pretty familiar from the T connector. So here's the first side being put on, and just hold that for a few seconds, and then we're going to do the other side. So here we're putting on the other facade on the other side, and once that dries, then we have a finished straight connector. So now we're going to make the corner connector. This one is pretty neat. We're going to cut 2 pillars of that cross connector interior. We're going to cut the 2 pillars that are adjacent to each other. You can see here, we're also going to use that spacer again, just like on the other ones. You can see it fits in there real well. So we're going to cut 2 pillars adjacent to each other. Now you'll notice here my spacer doesn't sort of sit down, it doesn't seat properly because there's a bulge of glue. Well, you can get around that by just sort of kind of angling it and then scoring the edges of the pillar. And from there you can infer the rest of the line. You just want to make sure that if there is a bulge of glue on your cross connector, that you don't let that throw off your measurement for your spacer. And then just like on the other connectors, the T connector and the straight connector, we're going to cut off the slivers of the pillars. In this case, the two pillars are adjacent to each other. So now we have the interior piece finished. And now we're going to make the facade, which is made out of the 1 1/8 inch by 2 inch piece and a 1 inch by 2 inch piece. We're going to glue the narrow edge of the 1 inch piece to the face of the 1 1/8 inch piece. Why? Well, when we do that, they automatically end up being the same length on each side. It's kind of cool. So we're going to glue those two sides. Again, the glue is on the narrow end of the 1 inch piece and is being glued to the face of the 1 1/8 inch piece. And we're going to hold on to our block. So now we're going to use our grid square template again to set the depth of the cross connector interior to the facade exterior, just like that. And just a thin bit of glue on there, as usual. And just hold until it's dry and you're good to go. That's it. You can use your foam ball to texture those facade pieces. Now you just want to make sure that you do support them, because if you press hard on those without supporting them with your fingers, you can break them off. They're still pretty delicate until you put that PVA paint glue mixture on here, at which point they become much more durable, and we're going to do that in a little bit. I also like to take a little bit of sandpaper and round the outside edges. This is optional. I just like how that looks. It does also make the edges, I think, a little bit more durable. When you have sort of a hard corner on there, I feel like they're more likely to chip. I don't have hard evidence of that, but in any case, I like how it looks with the rounded edges. And I also round the back corner edge of the corner connector too. I think it just looks really nice. And I also do the exterior edges too. And I did the same thing for the straight connector, but I didn't bother putting that on here for the video because it's basically just like doing the T connector, except you just do the additional facade face. So here's our 50-50 mixture of PVA glue and paint, and we just mix it up real well. You can add some water to it if it's kind of getting pasty, which is sometimes it will, just depending on what brand of acrylic paint you use. In this case, I didn't have to do that. So we're going to want to make sure that this paint gets into all those little crevices and all the connection points between foam pieces. And for that, I really like using a Q-tip because it really gets it in there and makes sure that the paint soaks into the foam. And it's also kind of the best way to get that paint PVA mixture inside the inside corner of that facade exterior piece, which I'll be doing in just a second here. It's great to get that in there because it really strengthens up that exterior facade piece and the connection between the facade and the interior cross connector. So you'll see here, yeah, I just kind of stick that into the little area, that little void in there between the two pieces, and that adds a lot of strength. So definitely want to make sure you do that. And then I just use a paintbrush to put on the rest of the paint and paint the entire thing. You'll see on some of the pieces that I use in videos that I didn't actually paint the bottom of the connector because I was being cheap with the paint until I realized I'm literally saving a fraction of a cent. So I would recommend painting the whole thing. And here I'm putting on our wash, roughly 10-to-1 mixture of water and paint to give those depressions in the outside some definition. And once that's dry, we're going to dry brush with our off-white paint, just like in the other videos. Here I'm using ivory. You can use bone, eggshell, anything other than straight white is what I recommend. And so that's pretty much it for the detailed connectors. Now, obviously, this video is not really heavy on making these look beautiful. It's more about the construction of the different pieces. So stay tuned for more videos on making them look a a little bit more interesting than just the stone texture. But the next Terraino related video will be on making doors. And so that should be great. That's a kind of a cool video I think you guys will like. In fact, we're going to make the doors so they'll be removable so you can use them for doors and archways. So stay tuned. Thanks. Please like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos. As my thank you for your support, I've also put some free downloads for you at GameGearMaster.com, including a free PDF that lays out the details on the different Terraino building blocks. And I'll be posting more free stuff there, as well as Game Gear, D&D adventures, and other stuff you can buy to support these free videos. So thanks again.